Somehow found my way to the Secretary of Commerce for the state of North Carolina, wrote a legislative note around crowdfunding to help layperson dollars get into the research opportunities coming out of our labs. Never thought I'd see that coming, but that happened. And you pair the open source ethos with something like that. You say, okay, we're going to get out ahead of the regulatory state in the apparatus to regulate, and it's a perfect opportunity to use my background to you do something interesting and novel, right? So I helped write the note, helped get appreciation for an opportunity where crowdfunding could really have an impact. I'm already in open source. Why not start a crowdfunding company? Let's do it, right? So it was this intersection of a unique experience that I had in my background, the expertise that I developed as well, and meeting the opportunity, meeting the moment. And why did I burn the boats? Why did I go after it? Well, I didn't. I did it on the side. That my first one, I did it on the side. I
Hey,
think that's actually smart. Is de-risk your opportunities, right? Especially when you're young. Um, you know, I've had the experience of thinking I've known everything, and turns out that that's not true. The one thing, the piece of advice I took is de-risk the opportunity and ensure that you're on the right path, right? So I did it on the side. Alum Shares was very much a first foray into entrepreneurship. And what I took from it was that you can be right in thesis and you can be wrong in timing. And you can be wrong about things you cannot control.
what's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Forward to Extraordinary, a part of the Strictly from Nowhere podcast experiment. I'm your host, Justin Abrams, a serial entrepreneur in pursuit of wisdom with the goal of sharing it with all of you. And that is no different for today. One of the things that I have to do on these episodes, you'll always see it, is I love connecting the dots and stitching together where my guests come from, how I know them, why I'm fortunate enough to be in this position. So shout out to a previous guest. I think it was one of last week's guests, but also one of the secret sauce behind the guests of this episode, James Kalistra, founder of Wonderfish. Thank you, sir, for being not only a fan and a guest, but also a really good friend. And today we're going to pay homage back to you, sir. Daniel, welcome to this episode of Forward to Extraordinary. I cannot wait to unpack your zero to market story. Admittedly, I don't know very much about you because you are one of the founders on LinkedIn that is in stealth mode. And so today on April Fool's, not an April Fool's joke, you guys are coming to market. We're gonna unveil and we're gonna see what's going on in your world. But Daniel, welcome to the episode. Let's get started with a little bit about you, your human experience, and what makes you unique.
Thanks, man. Nice to meet you, Justin. Nice talking to you
Likewise.
today.
Yeah.
So, a little bit about me. I have a very circuitous, serendipitous path over the past 15 so odd years, from coming out of law school during the Great Recession, hating life, trying to figure out heads from tails, figure out what I want to do with my, revolutions around the sun. And it turns out every step of the way was a really meaningful and interesting experience that led me to now. So, like I said, went to law school, hated it, worked at the SEC coming out, did not like it for various reasons, found my way to open source software development back when open source was incredibly vibrant. Social coding was very much a new, an exploding thing. For various reasons, got out of open source development, made my way into crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, this whole democratization of finance was super interesting. Got to see it, a great idea, kind of be strangled in the crib, so to speak. And man, that was right at the time that crypto came about, right? And crypto is this better tomorrow, tokens, it's going to be great, decentralization, and got to see that become a casino, and it's still, there's a lot of good technology there. And I don't mean to detract from it, but we can do more. And, if you think about it, that's what Quadrant is. That's what I'm trying to build, is taking the little pieces of goodness from all of these technologies and all of the experiences I have and build something that's durable, persists beyond me, and builds an economic model for individuals that really rewards the individuals for doing the right thing by themselves and the organizations that they work with and the people to follow. Justin, that was a ramble. Hopefully that made a bit of sense.
Hey, that was like super concise, and I got all sorts of bullets to before we get into Quadrant. I always like to take us back to origin stories, and the reason being is because a lot of this audience is trying to find the guts to go all in. They're the ones that started at the career at the SEC and are like, man, there's a brighter tomorrow for me somewhere. And so I want to get started a little bit about where you began your story, went to law school, and began at the SEC. I began my career literally by accident on the heels of Dodd-Frank, and
Oh, okay.
specifically
Yeah.
in personal trading and financial
Hmm.
management. And my father is a career compliance officer, and so your world of being in the SEC was like my punch in the face of the original career and keeping people away from the SEC, or at least abiding by the rules and regulations. So, why were you attracted to the SEC? Like going and getting your JD or just graduating law school, kind of world's your oyster. You could have worked in house at any tech company that was emerging at that time. They all needed in house counsel. Like, why regulatory bodies?
Because it was under the microscope at that point in time. The SEC had
I
this
love it.
opportunity to not go after selling away arrangements. We had an opportunity to do something, and there was a whole lot of corporate capture, the revolving door of individuals leaving the SEC, going to the private sector, and I went there as a very young, wet behind the ears individual. I left very disenchanted, and probably I was a little bit not aware of the way the world actually worked. And, you know, I found my way into technology because I wanted to be a part of progress, and open source was definitely the furthest thing from a regulatory entity that I could find. And I was really escaping the little box that being an attorney, being a regulator puts you into, and looking for something that was dynamic, flexible, very, guy sitting on his couch can build a repo and take on Microsoft. That was the furthest possible thing. And when being a young guy, that was attractive, that was sexy, that was interesting. There was more to it. So I kind of followed my heart there because of the experience that had led me to be a little bit disenchanted where I came from. So yeah, being in technology was again the furthest possible thing from regulation. But what you find is in all of these in technology is that there's still incentives issues, just like any other place. The incentive was at a regulatory agency was to optimize for your own outcome, right? Go get that general counsel opportunity. Turns out any system, even open source, has the same problem. You have large institutions that have corporate capture of the system that's doing the development work. And it turns out GitHub becomes a billboard, right? And it's a billboard to go get employed by those large institutions. And, arguably, I think that's the system operating as it may have been intended, but the intent when I got there wasn't to do so, right? I probably sound disenchanted with open source. I'm not. I think there's a better model today. I think it's a version one. Actually, I'll make a stand on that point. I think all of these that I've mentioned, not regulatory. Let's talk tech, open source, crypto, crowdfunding. All the version ones have either ended and are looking for a version two, or the version two is still quite nascent, and it remains to be seen what path they take.
I find it interesting the transition to open source. I'm not an engineer. I've never claimed to be an engineer, but I own and run a team of them. And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
it's very much part of my world. And open source for us is happenstance. Like we're putting out open source projects constantly. Open source doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for profit. Forget
Right.
nonprofit,
Yeah,
nonprofit entity. It
yeah.
doesn't mean that it's not for profit. It's this democratization of skill. It's the ability to give somebody a version that allows them to wrinkle it. Some of the open source projects that we're using today are famous and run the internet, and like they're still super valuable. And so I very much see the transition, from a humanity perspective of give, 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 right? Give, give, give till somebody asks for the order. It's famous line, famous line. And so I love the pursuit of the entrepreneurial path that is open source, a true builder of
Yep.
putting something out there. If somebody finds value in it, they'll either figure out how to contact you and exchange for cash for value, or how to work on your project and continue to propagate it. My next question for you has to do with the journey of entrepreneurship. So it sounds like you had a little bit of a traditional path. You went to university,
Hmm.
went to post grad to become a lawyer, entered into the job market. Where in the timeline, and maybe this happens when you were a kid, did the entrepreneurial spirit call to you?
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for putting a finer point on it. So open source, very egalitarian. A lot of eyes on a single project means that problem gets resolved quite quickly. Everyone is kind of has this. It's a low. effort, high outcome opportunity for you to contribute to something meaningful, right? So that kind of turned my eyes on, if you will, turned me on to doing something for myself. I somehow found my way to the Secretary of Commerce for the state of North Carolina, wrote a legislative note around crowdfunding to help layperson dollars get into the research opportunities coming out of our labs. I never thought I'd see that
Okay.
coming, but that happened.
Okay.
And you pair the open source ethos with something like that. You say, okay, we're going to get out ahead of the regulatory state and the apparatus to regulate, and it's a perfect opportunity to use my background to you do something interesting and novel, right? So I helped write the note, helped get appreciation for an opportunity where crowdfunding could really have an impact. I'm already in open source. Why not start a crowdfunding company? Let's do it, right? So it was this intersection of a unique experience that I had in my background, the expertise that I developed as well, and meeting the opportunity, meeting the moment. And why did I burn the boats? Why did I go after it? Well, I didn't. I did it on the side. That my first one, I did it on the side. I
Amazing.
think that's actually smart. Is de-risk your opportunities, right? Especially when you're young. Um, you know, I've had the experience of thinking I've known everything, and turns out that that's not true. The one thing, the piece of advice I took is de-risk the opportunity and ensure that you're on the right path, right? So I did it on the side. Alum Shares was very much a first foray into entrepreneurship. And what I took from it was that you can be right in thesis and you can be wrong in timing. And you can be wrong about things you cannot control. For example, the regulation didn't take the path that we needed it to. Non-accredited investors were not given a simple path to getting involved with private opportunities. Reg CF, Reg A plus, they're still quite extensive filings, and it's not the simple path, unlike crypto, which is anybody anywhere at any
Go for
time
it.
can
Right.
go for it, right? So I'll pause there. Justin, let me know if that made
You know, I'm,
sense.
I'm really interested in the crowdfunding space. When
Yeah.
people hear crowdfunding, they think of like
Yeah.
the two largest ones, the Kickstarter, the
Hmm.
GoFundMe.
Yeah.
If you really think about the value of those two platforms, something tells me that it's not quite your version of crowdfunding. So, just to kind of make this a little bit more digestible for everybody, when you think of crowdfunding, did you have a specific niche? Was this more of like non-institutional investors in tech startups? Like, what was your
Yeah.
version of crowdfunding?
So this does get a bit wonky, and I'll start with a personal story to kind of humanize it. So 2017, my mom got really sick, and it was something that we had to get her into a trial, trial for early for research coming out of university labs. And I went looking for trial information, went looking for any material that I could help me be an advocate. And yeah, the information's centralized. It's regulatorily mandated that that information must be available. The information isn't robust. You gotta have, it's a lot of jargon. You gotta be an expert to really know what you're doing. And fact of the matter is clinicians dealing with individuals like my mother don't have the time to go and search. And it's very difficult, suffice it to say, for a clinician to be on the cutting edge of medical research, right? That was a painful experience. Luckily, tribal networks being what they are, her doctor knew a guy from med school, got her into a trial, saved her life. But it
Man,
stuck with me that there's a huge opportunity to help individuals doing research advocate for themselves more effectively. A lot of this research, especially at medical research institutions that are associated with a university, they have enormous alumni bases. Wouldn't it
of
be
course.
great if the alumni bases helped get involved early, helped advocate, help perhaps fill that early stage funding gap, crowdfunding, and tell more of an emotive story about this deep research? So that was the idea. Alum Shares was this idea that rather than have a syndicate model where you pull your money into a bucket and then somebody else takes it and invests along with whatever VC, we could say you have a PhD in this, you have a master's in that. This research at your institution is taking place right now. It's supposed to resolve this. Tell a human story to somebody that actually can appreciate it. They become an advocate. Maybe money flows in. You fill an early stage funding gap because VCs and the investment set doesn't like doing long time horizon research stuff coming out of labs. There were so many opportunities there. So that's what we were going after. We were going after the emotional connection that an individual may have to research based on their background and based on a personal experience that maybe they themselves or someone they loved have gone through. Um, Crowdfunding was just the mechanism to show that that they had conviction behind what they believed.
You talked a little bit earlier about two things, thesis and timing.
Hmm.
And I think you might be alluding in your story to a strong thesis and some
Yeah.
awkward timing.
Yeah.
To me, though, dude, if you layered AI into that problem, I think it would have destroyed the equation, let alone
Hmm.
amplified it. I think AI
Yeah.
has a purpose, and maybe that's where we're leading, and that's maybe a bit of the impetus of Quadrant and
Yeah.
how valuable it can be. But
Yeah.
to me, you take such a human knowledge, a corpus of knowledge across real human talent, across real unbarriered access, use the human network experience, and then you layer in the machine. Maybe the machine has an aspect of that, but to me, we see so much just content fodder at the
Yeah.
moment. Just
Yeah.
just do I even trust the value of it? Does it have the latest of information, especially in a medical sector? Uh, you're even seeing doctors that are forgetting their studies, that are relying too much on the tool. There's an episode of The Pit. I don't know if you're watching The Pit right now on
No, I
HBO,
haven't seen it yet. No.
where the doctors are like struggling to put in their notes,
Hmm.
and so they introduce an AI tool, and the AI is
Hmm.
just hallucinating all sorts of
Yeah.
batshit. And so there is an aspect of this that just like doesn't really apply to the thesis, let alone the timing. But you didn't stop, and so we may be accelerating here, but I got to know all about Quadrant. I admit I know nothing about it. You've been totally in dark mode, stealth mode about it. And so this is the big reveal. And I'm stoked that you're on the show today to really talk about it. Whatever
Yeah.
amplification I can do is tremendous. But where are you at today? What are you working on? And kind of how does it stitch together both the thesis and the timing
Yeah.
component?
Well, I'm going to have to stop and talk about the crypto thing just a moment
Yeah, you
because it
should.
is
You
actually an
should.
integral component to it.
Let
Crypto
me
is
ask you
the
one
tool.
question on the crypto.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just make a separation for people's brains. There's
Yeah.
Web3 as like a
Yeah.
all
Metaverse
encompassing.
concept. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's crypto.
Right.
And so I like to separate these two. While crypto really was in like the next wave of the web and may
Hmm.
operate and be integral to some of these things within the Web3 ecosystem, there's lots of trials and failings that came out of Web3, also talking about the thesis maybe doesn't meet the timing of adoption and human
Yeah.
consumption. And
Yeah.
so when you talk about crypto, are you really talking about the financial model of crypto? Are you really talking about its application, its democratization, its decentralization? Or are you talking
Hmm.
about the universe of Web3 and all of its things? And maybe start there.
No, 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 no. It's distributed ledger blockchains.
Yeah,
Arguably,
great.
you would say that the technology around giving people tokens, permissionless, decentralized, whatever you want to call the system undergirding it, what you're really doing is you're giving people religion and then the mechanism by which to vote with their feet. Right. You're telling a very good story. You're giving them the ability to utilize the token to do something. It is the greatest organizational tool human beings have ever created. It is incredibly profoundly impactful, but the system does not have a intended economic model associated with it, so it defaults to speculation, right? As we've seen for the last 5, 6 years, and speculation for the sake of speculation is not bad. It's a signal. It's a useful signal, but there can be so much more done if you do it right, if you layer it into all of the other systems. So that was my learning, good and bad, in crypto specifically. What Quadrant is it this gigantic recognition that capitalism has a incentives problem baked into it,
Mm.
and it's also an appreciation that the way the world has worked to this point in time probably is not going to be the way the world looks even in 5 years, right? And that's vague. So let me get a little bit more specific. Let's think about media, right? Media over the past 30 years is unbundled, right? Look at podcasts, right? 30 years ago, podcasts weren't even a thing. You had CBS, NBC, ABC, right?
Right.
We had this monoculture associated with it. The internet happens, it unbundles. It becomes echo chambers, right? And then those echo chambers start to connect because people are in different echo chambers. And what that looks like is Reddit, right? Reddit is this network of communities where individuals opt in and they are voting with their feet on what information they do and do not agree with. Um, the thesis around Quadrant is markets are about to go do the exact same thing. That this regulatory infrastructure, the CFTC, SEC side, are becoming, more amenable to new and different concepts of value and markets around that value. Look at prediction markets. Like prediction markets have become, much more of a thing, not because there's an appetite for it, but because the regulators are enabling it. Now there's, pushback on that, but the point is that there is an appetite for change, and it's what our belief is. It's not going to come via Robinhood. It's not going to come via those prediction markets. It's an inversion in the way we appreciate assets, value, markets themselves. So what that means is that markets are going to come to us, right?
Mm.
Markets are going to unbundle. They're going to come to us, and the assets that we see today are not the assets of tomorrow. Assets today are things out in the world: bonds, equities, real estate, wine, cars. They're things that have a price that is somewhat archaeological. There's always a price out there already. You can find that price anywhere.
Right.
At this, with AI and blockchains coming together, we can evaluate dissimilar things as well as things into the future. So think of dissimilar things: patents, right? Incredibly hard to evaluate a patent. You have to hire somebody to come in, and even in the same space, this patent versus that patent, it's incredibly costly. And that's why intellectual property as a market remains largely static. Well, and now, translation and analysis are something that AI does incredibly well. All of a sudden, those static asset classes can be scrutinized quite readily, quite rapidly. But again, it's still an archaeological exercise. Those things already exist, and there was a price
Sure.
somewhere. We're just doing
Sure.
price refinement.
Right.
If markets unbundle to us, and the thing is not what already exists, but what's to come, then we ourselves are the market opportunity. We are the asset. We are the verifiers, and we are the market makers. Markets become infinite around us. However, it's a big idea. It's a crazy idea, right? Like, hopefully you're keeping up with me, Justin.
I am
But
for sure.
yeah, but that thesis that markets are going to unbundle, they come to us and we become the asset class, needs a whole lot of infrastructure, a new systems architecture to do the verification of us, what we say, where we've been. It ends up looking a lot like LinkedIn with Bloomberg on top, with Robinhood in the middle, right? There needs to be a lot of infrastructure there to get us on that journey, and that's what Quadrant's focused on. I just spent 5 minutes explaining to you, but that's the big picture. Markets are unbundling. We need to rethink what the valuable things are in the world. In a super abundant information environment, the verification becomes critical. We're starting at the verification layer to enable these markets built around us.
And so these are for markets, but who is your consumer of this? Like who would be your traditional customer?
Yeah. So great question. Eventually, we view verification as a tax on all expert related decisions in the economy. So anytime an expert, that last mile of judgment, because AI is hallucinating, as you described, you can't trust an AI, and you can't trust an AI to verify another AI. Humans always got to be in the loop. And that actually makes expertise more valuable than ever, not less. So our long-term customer is everyone that wants to bet on themselves and believe that they have a unique perspective in the world. That's not a place to get started. Where you get started is where the structure already exists in academia, universities. Our first customers are actually in the university and healthcare space, because healthcare hires a lot of individuals coming out of universities, especially medical research labs, medical research universities, R1, R2 university, research one, research two universities. So what this looks like is, to begin, an institutional layer for AI in organizations. Organizations need a finishing layer, because you've used Claude, you've used ChatGPT. There you go. Yeah, Claude.
The
That
original
you
Claude.
throw off. Yeah, there you go. God, I have a joke about art, but I'm not going to make it. Let's keep going. Art's a great asset class. We'll talk about that later. So if a human being is working with an AI in an organization, they have a superpower. That superpower is great for them, not good for the organization. They're moving at 1,000 miles an hour in whatever direction they'd like. There's no contextualization, no landing contextualized information back in an organization. That's what we're building first, the institutional layer, to simplify the settlement of versions of information that an individual agrees with and wants associated with them throughout time. That's what we're building for organizations, universities, and healthcare. The thing is that why would anybody want yet another tool in their workflow that's already fragmented and already too busy, right?
Looking
That's where
power,
the incentive comes in, right? And this is where the Web3 comes in. Rewards programs have been around for 20 plus years now.
of course.
We're building a rewards infrastructure for organizations to have to create the incentive for individuals to do the right thing by the organization. And what that looks like today is that you are rewarded for finishing your work, ensuring that it lands in the with context with so there's persistent memory within the organization, there's state, and the first step beyond that is allowing you to tell your story, build a portable reputation that follows you throughout the course of your career. Reputational infrastructure is another way of saying this. Taking a step back, kind of coming to the open source stuff, this looks a lot like GitHub, right? We're the GitHub. If the language of computers is Git, right? We're building the language for expertise and version control that exists within organizations as well as on the personal side. This will be critical as individuals can increasingly look at themselves and what they've created as an asset class. Your expertise is an asset class, and you need to evaluate it, verify it, and calibrate it continuously. There's a whole lot under the surface there, Justin, but hopefully that made a bit of sense.
Yeah, it seems like the monetization of thought leadership. And like you see some platforms that do this,
Yeah.
YouTube arguably does this.
Hmm.
If
Yes,
your ideas are big enough, you're rewarded. I literally have my
exactly.
silver plaque right here. It just came in the mail today. Rewarded. Great.
Congratulations.
For great effort, right? It's because of people like you. So thank you. Uh, but what I also am curious about, you were talking about verification, and like verification in the crypto space looks like proof of X,
Hmm.
proof of
Hmm.
stake, proof of work. We're getting into proof of life. Like there's all sorts of protocols here. Is that what you're talking about? The verification, like using the blockchain and a crowdsourced validation structure to verify legitimacy of information? Like, help me understand just a little bit more about when you say verification. What does
Hmm.
that mean? How does a regular schmegular like me, even if I was a
Yeah.
researcher at a university, I'm a relative nobody. You
Hmm.
become a somebody when you're peer reviewed, when
Hmm.
you're published and verified, or when you're
Yeah.
bold enough to not give a shit about what people think and you just put your ideas out there, and that's how you
Right.
get ex podcast host, Joe Rogan to talk. Right,
Yeah,
right. So,
it's a great question because it's hard to grok because it is abstract, you know?
yeah, it is.
The thesis is that right now we have a couple of industries that are quantifiable, right? And what we've seen over the course of time with sports gambling, for example, is previously ineffable or non-quantified athletics, right? All of a sudden become quantifiable. The question then becomes, what metrics do we deem as critical, right, to some predetermined outcome, right? That is what I think is going to happen to those previously non-quantified industries and activities. Currently, I mean, law, coming back from my background, anything associated with professional services, right? It's primarily social signals. Look at LinkedIn, right? Look at even hell GitHub. There is just this proxy for value. And again, it largely is a social signaling.
Absolutely.
And when you get into academia, it is primarily gossip networks and prestige. You rely upon that. The thesis is here that if you use speculation as the language of conviction, much like sports gambling, things can be quantified. Now, what metric is the most valuable? Who's to say? And it's going to be different for any subsector. But think about Reddit, right? Value is completely different to each of these communities. You need to create the mechanisms by which each of these communities can evaluate themselves and come up with metrics that they view as durable, sustainable, meaningful. I don't think Quadrant is the purveyor of top down and index score of your value, but you provide the mechanisms for markets to articulate what value is to them, and that's I think where the opportunity lies. Not me telling a doctor that he's great for XYZ reason, but a series of doctors to use speculation as a mechanism to actually derive the things that are truly valuable. I think there's a Nicholas Taleb quote. It's don't tell me what you think, show me what's in your portfolio. And it's exactly that. It's exactly that, but atomized to micro markets with individuals' reputations on the line.
Which I really love. And it's on the masthead of my website. It's don't
Yeah.
talk about it, be about it.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Exactly that.
put up or shut up is another way from my childhood that we used to talk about it. And I think that that's largely valid. Um, I think that there's definitely an appetite where it seems like the idea has been baking over a period of time, and the advent of AI has added something to
Mhm.
this thesis. Are you comfortable to talk about what your application of AI is and how you're leveraging that? Is it for validation perspectives? Is it extrapolation on ideas? Is it connect like minds? Is it part of
Yeah.
your algorithm function? Like, besides the acceleration of creating, of building the software behind all of this, what is the use case of AI currently, if you're comfortable to share?
Yeah, and I'll say that we're not building a foundational model. We're not
Yeah.
looking
Right.
to do something fundamentally novel, build hardware, anything like that. I think that we've seen this story before. We've seen the story of hardware, and then hardware become commoditized, and then an abstraction, an overlay on top of it, become the valuable thing. I think this story is going to play out very similar. It's not going to be the same, but it's going to rhyme. I think that you're going to see models become good enough and pervasive enough and cheap enough and performant enough. And then we're going to move on to a layer above it, doing something else more valuable. And I think the something else more valuable that Quadrant is focused on is the intersection of utility and integrity of human beings. Again, coming back to the humans as assets type thing. It is this recognition that there's a new re-architecting of value, which requires new infrastructure to do the evaluation. And not the evaluation as a social proof, and not the evaluation at a one at a time sequential exercise, but building a true market. Like think about what hyper trading has done to our markets today. The regulation was built for when people had ticker tapes and you walk down the street and you got, and now that regulation's being applied to, you got to be closest to the market because yeah, that nanosecond it makes you more productive and more, have the edge on somebody else. We are building an infrastructure for a new way of thinking about what value means to us in our careers going forward. For example, universal basic income is not going to be a top-down thing. It's going to be a bottoms-up opportunity, especially in the United States, just given the culture here. How do you actually create a universal basic income structure? Well, a passive annuity type system that pays you for the things that you've done is probably the opportunity. Hell, YouTube operates that like that already. You're making money off the videos and the recordings. That's a passive annuity type structure.
Exactly right.
Now apply that to everything that you've done meaningfully in your career over a 45-year career. That's how I think we get there. But you need the AI, the AI systems in place to do the translation and all of the analysis needed. But most importantly, I think that individuals need to think of themselves as that critical lever in wherever AI is used, which takes me back to why we're selling institutional AI to companies now, because companies have a problem. There's too much information and not enough understanding of what is and is not good. It is more efficient to incentivize an expert to do that disambiguation, that clarification, than it is to teach a computer judgment, to teach a computer what is and is not good. So until we come up with computers that have judgment and wisdom and expertise to replace a human, it's going to be more cost effective for companies to incentivize and celebrate the experts employing them, which is why AI, we view AI as more of a wedge opportunity for us and not us competing with somebody else over development of a foundational model.
Amen. Amen. I just released an entire personal episode with my business partner this morning about it, so I'm
Good.
right on path with you. Right on path.
Yeah.
It's not all blue sky though. Like you're trying to create something new. You're trying to infiltrate new markets. You have a big thesis. It's only proven by the exchange of dollars. And so, talk to me a little bit about tribulation, because lots of folks here that watch the show are going to feel the pain of entrepreneurship, the barriers along the way. And so, if you kind of think back from wisdom's perspective and sharing the do's and don'ts of building something, might be novel, might just be a wrinkle on something and a new way of digesting it. It seems to me that you probably have come up against barriers. And so I wonder, do you have any wisdom that comes to mind for folks that are trying to build something new, for folks that are trying to build in stealth mode, burning midnight oil while they have a full-time career, that are looking to the horizon for a hopeful tomorrow? what would be your wisdom to an up and coming building something?
Yeah, it's a good question. De-risk as much as possible while keeping your options open until you feel like you have an asymmetric advantage because of that's why experience is so important, right? Like you have to know when you have something good, which means experience in life is critical. Once you've de-risked while keeping your options open, move fast, burn the boats, so to speak. Get yourself out there, which is what I'm doing here. Get yourself out there as much as you can and start creating the vocabulary. You want to, and this is a deeper point, do not do AI for accounting. If I can say one thing to you, like do not do AI for this, AI for that. Come up with something profound, which again takes experience and wisdom. Come up with a big bet. And when you have that big bet, burn the boats and move as quickly as possible. Get yourself out there. If you're not out there, you don't exist. And start building the vocabulary for yourself. Your vocabulary is the railroad track in front of you. You are laying track every time you talk about something and talk about it with conviction because you should believe in the big bet you've burned the boat to go and pursue. That was an alliteration. My apologies. um, no, yeah. So the where I would go from here is that because you're making a big bet on something that doesn't exist yet, you're going to be confronted with individuals who not only most people can deal with disagreement, they don't even understand, right? We have an investment set right now that was birthed in a zero rate environment, and life was easy, right? And life is not so much easy as it is. And we're going through a paradigm shift right now. It's incredibly difficult to not have any signal on it if you're on the right track at all. But trust your gut because you have the experience that you burn the boats to go and pursue, and believe in yourself. You have to have that self belief that you're right. And if you're not right, you're close enough to the mark that you can recalibrate as necessary. Continue to be supple, continue to have an open mind, take feedback. If the feedback is totally off the mark, again, you should have enough experience to know. But if somebody has a good point, reconstitute your core ideals and move forward. That's that was a lot, Justin, but that's what my experience has told me. Believe in something, bet on it, bet on yourself, and learn as much as you can as quickly as you can.
You know what? I'm a twofold response to what you just said because sound wisdom, and you have the
Yeah,
right guy for wisdom
yeah,
like that. And I think my
yeah.
audience is largely the right audience for wisdom like that. But I do have like a bit of fear about that because you and me as operators and just humans in general, the stories that I tell, the experiences that I have help me to be an entrepreneur. It's what I fall back on is everything I have experienced. And that's like the true essence of wisdom. I'm like deeply concerned about the next generation. And I
Hmm.
have children.
Hmm.
And I'm worried about my children's version of experience.
Hmm.
My experience is literally hand to hand. Been to every
Hmm.
continent, been around the world twice, met everybody once. It's literally it's what I'll say in the bar if you catch me after a drink. I am worried about what does it mean to go and get that job out of college that you don't really like. I'm worried
Hmm.
about like the premature specialization because the tooling is so capable these days. I'm worried that like I don't need to go and experience because the AI has the answer already. I
Yeah.
don't need to go simple one. I don't need to go on Safari because Grok can make me the image that I would see there with my own two eyes. I'm worried about it. And so the
Hmm.
wisdom that you have, and maybe you can take this a step further, like if you were speaking 20 years from now to the graduating class of high school about to enter the
Hmm.
university and labor force and all that, you're going to have like I'm worried that the wisdom that you have is going to be almost eye rolly. Like
Hmm.
I don't what do I need that because I have this. And so while I love it and I eat all of that up, I wonder, do you see the another market shifting, which is the either hyper specialization or the um, hands off, the laissez
Hmm.
faire approach to everything. You know, and that's something that I worry about with that universal basic
Yeah.
income equation is like, does it give you complacency or does it give you freedom to explore and create and experience? And I just don't know yet. So I wonder if you've
Yeah.
thought about it.
Yeah, I have. Apathy is certainly a feeling whenever there's a paradigm shift takes place. Like any information technology revolution does create that. I actually have a photo of the Luddites on our website, like
Oh.
Luddites beating the textile mills, you know? I was like, yeah, it does. It creates fear. I'll say that AI makes the need for varied expertise more critical than ever. If we do this right, expertise is the most valuable resource on the planet if we do this right, which is why I'm trying to build the systems for it. So, unlike in times past, where our grandparents and our great grandparents had a pension, right? And now we have a 401k, and it doesn't matter what you do, the company's throwing money at that. Yeah, right. You could stay at a company forever and get a gold watch, and that pension was they're going to be there, and then the 401k has been contributed to. That is, I think, going to go away. The career as we understand it is going to go away. But that last mile of experience is going to be more critical than ever. That tells me individuals need to be having more and varied experiences because that's what machines can't replicate is the brownfield creativity. This looks a lot like this. Let me go over here. That innate human creativity, which underlies expertise, is going to be more critical than ever. So for young people, I would say don't go into, law. Sorry, unless you really want to. No, I would say go and have as many experiences, but be very deliberate about what you're getting from them, why and for what reason. I was very fortunate that my serendipitous path led me to a lot of intersections between culture and technology. Could not have predicted that. But if I could go back and tell myself what to do going into a future like this, it's you're going to have many careers. You're going to have many experiences that you get paid for. Be sure you are collecting what you got out of it in a meaningful way and constructing a very strong roadmap and narrative for yourself going forward. Because that is the only way, in my personal opinion, you're going to make those experiences work for you, both from a social signaling as well as a quantifiable perspective going forward. These machines need us. These systems need us. Let's make ourselves the biggest signal possible.
We're probably going to run out of time for the conversation for today, but I talk very frequently with guests on this show about the value of the personal brand. And I think you
Mhm.
just explained it in an interesting way that has not really been presented on the show, which is like the accumulation and the vocalization of your previous experiences equals your personal brand. And of course, you can you can make it sexy, you can make it unique, you can make it colorful and whimsical or flamboyant or whatever your approach is to your own personal brand, but it really is the accumulation of your experiences. And I love the way that you put like multiple careers. It's like the experience in exchange for income.
Mhm.
And so I really like that, and I think that answers what my curiosity was about the question, which is what will the next generation be able to accumulate if it's not necessarily boots on the ground experience. Maybe it is leveraging the tools, but itemizing the things that you have done with that tool, either built or solved or thought of or whatever. It still takes the creativity of the human to input to receive an output. And so I love that perspective. As we round third base, I always like giving the last word to my guests. These conversations often drum up something where we'll cut the episode and you'll be like, shit, I wish we would have talked about that. So now's your time, Daniel. If there's anything top of mind that you think is relevant to the conversation that we haven't talked about for today, I would love to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, I would say the things that ton of things in my mind. I think Quadrant's a big bet on human beings being important in the future going forward. There's a lot to that. Verification infrastructure says a fancy way of saying there's a lot of mechanisms to evaluate. There's a lot of intellectual property law that's a bit hairy. What is yours versus what is a company's that we've worked out and considered. But really, it comes down to human beings having a mechanism to bet on themselves. And when I say speculation, it's not speculation like gambling, it's calibrating your perspective using money basically. That is quite a valuable signal in the world, and it's been constricted to this point. So we're building this big system to help individuals bet on themselves, that signal qualify them as expert, organizations better understand what they have when they employ this individual, right? This is not so different than any other social signal mechanism and system and architecture that's been out there. We're just doing it at AI speed, right? So wrapping that up, humans are more critical than ever if we do it right. We need a system like us, and if not like us, someone like us to connect all these pieces and tell a story about humanity's criticality to a cyborg centaur type future in a way that's persistent, durable, and keeps humans at the center of it. So that's my spiel, Justin. Thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Uh, I certainly love it, and I'm definitely watching. I think the audience is super curious right now. I think to talk about it is different from actually utilizing it. And if you're successful in the thesis, I think it becomes part of the natural experience of life and jobs and how we're all going to interact with each other. And so I wish you, as I always do to all of my guests, forward to extraordinary, because
Thank you.
while it won't be easy, it will be valuable. And so, Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your zero to market, and thanks for joining this episode.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. See you.